This video explains how to apply the sweep function in the R programming language. So without too much talk, let's dive into the R code. In this video I will show you several examples, and all of these examples are based on the matrix object that we can create with line 2 of the code. So if you run this line of code, you can see at the top right of RStudio that a new data object is appearing, which is called data. And we can print this data object to the bottom in the RStudio console by running line 3 of the code. And then you can see that we have created a matrix object containing 6 rows and 4 columns. And all of the elements in this matrix are at this point equal to 0. Now we can use the sweep function to add certain values to each element of this matrix, as you can see in the next line of code in line 5. So within the sweep function we need to specify the name of our data object. So in this case our data object is called data. Then we have to specify the margin argument to specify whether we want to add these values by rows or by columns. Then we have to specify the stats argument to tell the function what value we want to add to our matrix. And we have to specify the function argument to tell the sweep function that we want to add certain values to our dataset. So if you run line 5 of the code, you can see at the top right of RStudio that a new data object is appearing, which is called data x1. And we can print this matrix to the bottom in the RStudio console by running line 6 of the code. And then you can see that we have used the sweep function to add the value 5 to each element of our matrix. Now, this is a very simplified example. However, we can also apply the sweep function with more complex data structures, as you can see in the next example in lines 8 and 9 of the code. So in these lines of code, I'm changing the stats argument, and I'm setting this argument to be equal to a vector containing different numeric values. Now, if we run lines 8 and 9 of the code, another data set is appearing at the top right, which is called data x2. And if we print this data set to the bottom in the RStudio console, you can see that we have used the sweep function to add this vector object to each of the columns of our data. So as you can see, the values in this vector object have been added to each column in our data set. Now we can also change the margin argument, as you can see in the next example in lines 12 and 13 of the code. So in this case, I'm setting the margin argument to be equal to 2. And then you can see that another data set is appearing. When we run this line of code, you can also see a warning message at the bottom in the RStudio console that tells us that the stats argument is longer than the dimension to which we are applying our function. And you can also see that by printing the new data object to the RStudio console, because now you can see that we have not added this vector object by columns as we did before. However, this time we have added this vector object row-wise. So the values 1, 3, 0 and 2, so the first 4 elements of our vector, have been added in the first row, and then the values 10 and 5 have been added at the second row in the first 2 columns, and then the vector starts once again with the values 1 and 3. And since this stats vector is longer than the number of columns in our dataset, the sweep function has returned a warning message. However, the output was still created. We could also modify the stats argument once again to make this vector that we have assigned to the stats argument shorter, as you can see in the next example in lines 16 and 17 of the code. So if you run these lines of code, the sweep function returns an output without any warning messages, and we can see this output by running line 18 of the code. And then you can see that we have added the values 1, 3, 0 and 2 to each row of our dataset. So in this tutorial I have explained how to apply the sweep function in very basic examples. However, you could also specify other functions for the fun argument, and you could also specify more complex data structures to the other arguments of the sweep function. That's all I wanted to explain in this video. In case you want to learn more on this topic, you may check out my homepage statisticsglobe.com, because on my homepage I have recently published a tutorial in which I'm explaining the content of this video in some more detail. I will put a link to this tutorial into the description of the video so you can find it there. If you have liked this video or if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below. I'll try to respond to all comments as soon as I can. Furthermore, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel to get notified about future video releases. I have already published about 500 videos on this channel and I'm releasing new videos on a daily basis. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next video.